Alex, welcome to That Was the Week. It's a pleasure to have you here. First time ever, I think.
Thank you. Yes, first time, hopefully not the last. I'm excited to be here with you.
So let's spotlight you and put up your lower third. Tell the people watching this a bit about yourself.
So I'm a former BuzzFeed News tech reporter. I was a senior tech reporter there for 5 years. And then in June, I'd like to say I was part of the first wave of the reporters going independent. So, I had just finished up writing my book called Always Day One, which looks into the work cultures of Amazon, Apple, Facebook, Google, and Microsoft. So I was basically already, doing a lot of stuff independently. And then I just figured, well, I write a newsletter anyway. I see a lot of potential for me doing this completely on my own, and said this was the time to do it. So I took what was the Tech Giant Update at BuzzFeed. I brought the subscribers over with me to Substack and founded Big Technology, which is a newsletter that tries to tell the story behind the story with Facebook, Google, Amazon, Apple, and Microsoft. And then there's also a Big Technology podcast, which I record and publish every Wednesday. It's available on all your favorite podcast apps. And we try to have a discussion with either a tech insider or an outside agitator once a week that looks just like into the details of what's going on in the tech world. Something long form and unstructured and supposed to be kind of fun and show you stuff you can't get in a normal article.
Fantastic. And by the way, let's just show this, but that was the week. We always have a tweet of the week. And this week, you'll be pleased to see that the tweet of the week is actually your book.
Hey, I appreciate that. A lot of work went into the book. I did 130 interviews with everyone from Mark Zuckerberg to, people on the front lines in Amazon warehouses. And then it came out on April 7th, right in the middle of like the worst part of the first wave of the pandemic. So I appreciate you spotlighting it. I can use any help that I can get. And if people want to, pick it up and then send me your thoughts, I'm always interested to hear what people have to say about it.
Actually, I'm fascinated by it. We can't talk about it now because we haven't got time, but the Google toolbar was an era I through and participated in. So I strongly recommend anyone who wants to understand tech and how it got to where it is today. Great read. So That Was the Week is a stolen title from an old British TV satirical comedy called That Was the Week That Was. But we don't do comedy. We try to focus in on really important topics that are going to affect mainly founders, angel investors, and VCs. And this week, and actually this has been true for the last couple of weeks, the antitrust case against Google and the discussion around Section 230 of the Communications Act and whether Twitter, Facebook, and Google should interfere with or censor stuff published by third parties on their platforms have dominated everything. And I am like a broken record. So I thought it'd be great this week to have somebody else's opinion. You are obviously been observing all of this, and you've read in my newsletter this week, I actually feature your story about the weak link in the case against Google. Tell us how you're watching this happen and what it's making you think.
Right. Should we start with the Google case that the DOJ is bringing?
Go for it.
Okay. So you look at Google, it's the most powerful company in the world, in my opinion, even more powerful than Amazon, at least for the time being. And you would imagine that a government, when it looks at antitrust, would start to bring the case that matters, which is, like all the tech giants, the problem with these companies is that they will have, a marketplace that they'll create, and then they'll rig the marketplace so that their own services will win. To use the Amazon example, they have the e-commerce marketplace where people can sell goods in, but they use their sellers' data and then develop their own private label products and sell in their marketplace. There's no laws against that right now. And that's really become, a pretty serious issue. And it's just helped these tech companies, dominate the smaller companies even more and solidify their dominance and crowd out competition in the marketplace. If you're a capitalist, this is not something you want. With Google, they started out as as well, right? They started out as a search engine, delivering you the opportunity to be able to make sense of the internet and find the websites you want. But then they rigged their marketplace to become the internet, in and of itself in many ways. You search Google, you almost you very regularly end up on Google Maps, Google Shopping, Google News, and what's going on with the rest of the sites that you were there to find. Google does a good job of making sure you don't really get there and you stay within its properties. So that's what we should be focusing on. What we're focusing on instead is something that's much narrower and I think less important, which is Google's distribution deals. So the Department of Justice is not into the fact that Google pays for other services to have its search engine, inside their services. One of the most interesting things I saw inside the DOJ's report was that if you take 100% of search that goes on in the world, 20% goes on Google's owned and operated properties, 60% goes on in other properties such as Apple's iOS that Google pays to be the default browser, and then 20% happens elsewhere. So the DOJ is bringing this case against Google, essentially saying, hey, you're paying for this stuff.
Clicks on a web document or when an application opens.
Hey, Google, stop.
Yeah, we turned it on. See, that's an owned and operated property, right?
For some reason, the Google Assistant thought.
Yeah, I probably said the H Google word. But the Department of Justice is bringing this case against Google and saying the main issue is that you pay other services to be the default, which to me is like the weakest possible case. And if you think about what happens if the Department of Justice wins, okay, so who stands to gain from this?
Yeah.
And honestly, the answer is two other tech giants that are more powerful. Well, not more powerful, but potentially that have higher valuations on the market, right? Which is Microsoft with Bing and Apple, which might create its own search engine. So is our Department of Justice there to prevent anti-competitive behavior or to pick winners and losers? And right now it's picking winners and losers and not getting at the right thing, in my opinion.
That's interesting. I mean, the point that I observe is to be a monopoly, you have to own a market, or at least largely own a market. And I personally don't think search is a market. I think search is a technology.
Mm-hmm.
The market is advertising. Now, if you think about, you made some really good points about how much search is happening off of Google. And by the way, I think if you added Twitter and Facebook in, it might even go down lower, and Instagram, for example. But I'd be interested in what you think about this point. Google's advertising share has been declining every year for quite a number of years now as Facebook's has grown. And the cost per click that it achieves from web clicks on advertising has also been declining. So my point of view is that Google is actually a declining market owner in a market it's barely owns half of now. And so it isn't really a monopoly in any market, although it is dominant in search technology. How do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, look, Google's still growing, so I wouldn't say it's the end of Google now, but it definitely has more competition than it did before. You point to Facebook and Twitter as companies that are taking its share. To me, the biggest competitor there is Amazon. I mean, you can look at Amazon's advertising revenue, and advertising's revenue is all search because it comes when you're expressing intent to buy a product inside Amazon. It's the same thing Google does. And that business has been exploding, right? So if you end up taking action against Google, you got to be really careful because the end result could really mean, I mean, if the DOJ comes in and kneecaps Google in any meaningful way, the end result can really mean, as we've talked about, more search share for Bing, potentially search share for Apple with its own search engine, and then greater percent of search advertising going to Amazon. And again, like, I don't think that solves the main issue, which is, which is Google favoring its own products within search.
Do you read Ben Thompson's Stratechery at all? I
do.
What did you think about his point that Google is the default because it's best?
So his argument, if I get it right, was that Google paying for these distribution deals or paying for these default deals will help it stay in a number one position because it has the quality of results, that improve because of the number of searches that happen upon it, which is an argument. I get it, but I'm also kind of skeptical of it because, are you telling me then that, Bing, which has, an untold number of searches is losing because of search volume? Are you telling me that DuckDuckGo is losing because of search volume? I think at the end of the day, it comes down to the technology for those two, more than it comes down to the volume. And again, I just think that we're really focusing on the wrong issue here.
Yeah, that is his point, by the way. He says Apple would default to Google even if Google didn't pay it because it's better.
Yeah, but okay, yeah, maybe it would, or it might, again, develop its own version of Google. If Apple made a search engine that was 75% as good, it would make a ton of money. Yep. You already know that Apple is trying to supplant Google Maps with Apple Maps. So what's to prevent them from creating their own search engine and taking there? I don't really buy the fact that Apple would necessarily still go to Google if Google wasn't paying them.
Actually, this week, today, there are rumors suggesting that might be happening. I don't know how real they are, but
look, it's only a matter of time. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction, and the Department of Justice is actually going to cause, some ships to move on this thing, no doubt about it.
So let's. I'd love to drill down into Google's curation of the search results and pointing inwards to its own properties. I could talk for a long time about that because that's what Yahoo did for a long time as well. Usually it's a sign that the tech is not as good as it used to be, and so they need to intervene, let's say. But we haven't got time, so let's quickly move to the Section 230 stuff and your views about that.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to think that this was a fairly embarrassing hearing for Congress. Again, they could be focusing on antitrust. They adjourned the Senate and still had this hearing basically to complain about Google either favoring, keeping up or taking down content that didn't play into their interest politically. And I honestly think that, like, at this point in this country, we really got to look at our elected representatives among, many other reasons, but, just make it clear to them that they're just not doing the job that they were sent there for. And, to have Marsha Blackburn complain about, the fact that some Google employee said things that she didn't like, even if they were mean, but you're a U.S. Senator using, your position to go advocate, against someone's employment at a tech company. I mean, come on, people. I mean, look around. We're going through the biggest political, economic, and health crisis of our lifetimes. And for, a bunch of senators, some of the most powerful people in the country, to sit around, complaining again about their Google results, to me is kind of ridiculous.
Right. So I watched it a little bit, and because I was a political activist and I'm on the left, my natural instinct is to hate the Republicans. But I must admit that yesterday, a lot of the time, the Republicans, not all of them, some of them were being jerks, but some of them were sounding like they were standing up for free speech more than the Democrats or the CEOs. So when Mark Zuckerberg said he believes that Section 230 should be modified and there should be regulation, and then when Cruz said to Dorsey, shouldn't you just be a platform where people can say what they want and let other people disagree with it? You just keep out of it, unless it's criminal, of course. A bit of me was thinking, wow, I think I agree with Cruz more than I agree with the platform starting to editorialize. And, that's got a lot to do with me. I started an ISP, and I remember resisting police requests to patrol what was on our network, because I didn't want that job, and I didn't think it was my job. I thought it was their job. So how do you, the core issue of editorializing, censoring as it's sometimes called, but I think that's the wrong word often.
Even Mike Lee admitted that censoring is not the right word. He called it a term of art. But sorry, go ahead.
So what do you think about that? Are you kind of like a First Amendment free speech at all costs, or do you think that these are really publications with editors, and of course they've got the right to do whatever they want, they're private companies, but what should they do?
Yeah, this conversation, not the one that we were having, but the fact that this has become such a big part of the conversation in Congress drives me a little bit nuts, because I think there's so much of a focus on content moderation that we lose sight of the fact that these platforms can structure the way that they work in a way that can improve health. And that's what we should be focusing on. I've written about this in Big Technology in a piece that I call Outputs versus the Machine. Are we going to look at the outputs, the thing that they spit out, or are we going to look at the machine and try to figure out why they're spitting out what they're spitting out? And I just did a story on this today in Big Technology, looking at the fact that Facebook and Twitter are both rethinking their share buttons. I mean, they are making editorial decisions by the way that they structure, the way that these platforms work. The way that they encourage engagement and incentivize movement of content will change what people see. And we can tell right now that that stuff isn't very good. So what's the solution? To me, I think that we need to add more friction to the share process. The share button and the retweet button notoriously strip out all the thoughtfulness that we used to have before we would share something with someone. Usually when you send someone an article, it's because you've read it and you want them to, consider some of the arguments. What happens on the social media platforms is oftentimes people will hit share or retweet when it confirms their bias. They don't read the article. Oftentimes they pass along misinformation. In fact, there's research out of MIT that shows that if you stop for a minute and think about something before you share it, you're much less likely to share misinformation. Yeah. I think this discussion needs to focus on the machine. It needs to focus on the fact that we have to add friction to this process and what will happen to the information health, of these social media platforms and of our society as a result. To me, that's where I think we need to focus on. And honestly, then your point of view to me and makes total sense, which is that's where I want to get to. I want to get to a place where we don't need to talk about, content moderation because of the fact that this stuff moves slower. But until they slow it down, that's just the thing that we're going to be talking about for good.
I generally believe that they should produce tools that let the crowd engage with points of view they disagree with in a non-hostile manner. Like, for example, if I could fact check a tweet and my fact check would come under the tweet, that's almost better than Twitter fact checking the tweet. Just because, and the reason I say that is, and we'll close on this soon, is, the human race is incredibly diverse and made up of points of view, many of which I disagree with. And at some point, we have to figure out how tech can reflect the actual human race. In a way, you can't pick the human race you want. It's what it is. And there are lots of people who are foolish. There's lots of really smart people. There's smart people with wrong ideas. There's foolish people with right ideas. The minute you start trying to, section off the people you agree with and kind of punish the ones you don't agree with, that doesn't seem a very likely successful end result to me. And tech ends up, being less rich than the real world if you go down that path.
Mm-hmm. No, I'm with you 100%. I would say more speech is better than less speech, but we also want to make sure that the platforms aren't filled with misinformation and stuff that tears us apart. And I think the way to do that is just to focus on the structure. So that's, to me, the entire thing. Slow it down versus take it down. And that's what's going to improve our society.
So, Alex, we got to wrap it there. It went way longer than I thought it was going to go. But you were doing a great job with Big Tech. There's the URL for everyone there if you want to go and subscribe to Alex's newsletter and podcast. And it's the first time I've actually brought a guest on the show whose stuff I featured in the newsletter that's going out tomorrow. So I think it was a great success. I might have to do more of this. Alex, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. This was great.
You're welcome.